I know this discussion was riveting from chapter 2, section 4, but we're still in example 4, and we were talking about the law of syllogism and how the law of syllogism does not bear out either of these two concepts, either of these two conclusions is valid. If you do not enjoy musicals, then you are not an actor. If you do not enjoy musicals, you are not an actor. So that's like some negation of Q, then implying that R is not true, and that's not a part of the law of syllogism either, and that's not something that we can do from our statement. So this is also invalid, and the answer is that there is no valid conclusions here. I'm sorry, I feel like that was really depressing a little bit. Like, come on, you just taught us a new concept textbook, and here you go making me not use it. Let's see if we can find an example where we can use the law of syllogism for a positive logical outcome. So here's example of 5, and we're going to apply some kind of deductive reasoning, either using the law of detachment or the law of syllogism. And so we're going to draw a valid conclusion from the given statements, if possible, then state which way we do that. Do we do it through the law of detachment or the law of syllogism? If no valid conclusion can be drawn, we're going to write no valid conclusion and explain our reasoning. So here it is. If you are 16 years old, then you can apply for a driver's license. So that's my clear P implies Q, and since it's our given statement, we're assuming that it is true. Now here's what we find out, that Nate is 16 years old. So what do we know? Do we know anything about Nate? If you're 16, then you can apply for a driver's license. I'm hearing you through this screen, and you're telling me, you're like, Nate can apply for a driver's license. All right, I'm going to write it down. Don't shout. So let's see. So Nate can apply for a driver's license. Let's see if that fits any of our thinking. So P implies Q, right? Being true means that what? That here's P again, right? Nate is 16 years old. That means that since P is true, then we can say Q is true, right? I think this is actually a good conclusion to come up with. But now what do we have? Where did we come up with that conclusion? Was it the law of syllogism, where we start with one thing, go to another, then we start with that thing, go to another, and determine that we can go from the first thing to the last thing? Or was it the law of detachment, where we say if P then Q is true, and then we find out that P is true in a certain situation, we can conclude Q is true. Yep, this is law of detachment that we were dealing with here with Nate and his newfound desire to drive. So this would be law of detachment. Yes, so here I really want to find another situation to apply law of syllogism. Let's see if we can find one. Okay, so I know I don't usually do this, but I found this other example that I think might be kind of nice to play with these two ideas. So looking at example 5, it says draw a valid conclusion from the given statements if possible, then state whether your conclusion was drawn from using law of detachment or law of syllogism. If no valid conclusion can be drawn, write no valid conclusion and explain your answers. So let's look at number 8. It says if Dahlia finishes her chores, she will receive her allowance. If Dahlia receives her allowance, she will buy a CD. Notice that. You got this kind of a one step, go from here to there, and then from there to over there. That's always going to be the case when we have law of syllogism as a possible explanation for our conclusion. So notice we've got P, let me write this down. We've got, oh, I don't have a pen here. Hold on. I forgot I'm using the actual textbook, so I can't write on this. But we have P, if Dahlia finishes her chores, then Q, she will receive an allowance. Then from Q, if Dahlia receives her allowance, Q, then R, she will buy a CDR. So when we have this situation, this kind of step situation, we can go from P straight to R. So the conclusion that I would suggest here, and I'm not going to write it down because I can't, is that if Dahlia finishes her chores, she will buy a CD. if Dahlia finishes her chores, she will then buy a CD. We can assume that given the law of syllogism. Syllogism requires this kind of a three-step situation. Let's check on this guy. Vertical angles are congruent. Vertical angles are congruent. Vertical angles are congruent. And then we have that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. So vertical angles are congruent. If the angles are vertical, then they are congruent. That's what this is saying. If you've got vertical angles, then you know that they're congruent. So if P, then Q. Here they gave me Q. Can I then imply P was the cause? I can't. Notice that the law of detachment, this almost looks like a law of detachment opportunity, but the law of detachment says if P then Q is true, then if you get a P, you can assume that Q is true. That's not what we have here. We have if P then Q, and then it's like, hey, I'm going to give you Q. Haha, are you going to say it's P? It's not. I know that sounds really weird, but the fact of the matter is, let's just use logic. Vertical angles are congruent. That's a fact. But just because you have two angles that are congruent doesn't mean that they were vertical. With that in mind, I'm going to be done with this lesson, and I do expect to hear some questions from you. But if not, I look forward to seeing you soon. But ask questions. Let's talk about it. This is a meaty topic, and I think it deserves more attention, especially if you need it. All right, take care, honey. Bye-bye.